So for this final stage, I've put the light back on and I'm looking at the subject itself again. So I want to look at maybe how these planes differ in real life. I'm looking at subtle aspects as well, and I'm also looking at detail. So from here I can see it's quite confusing because there's so many things going on, so I really need to step back, just have a plan, be methodical and go about this step by step. So maybe I look at the green first of all, and let's look at light, shade. So 3 values of green. So if I look at this, I can see quite clearly my terminator or co-shadow there. It's much lighter or less pronounced in reality than it is how I've drawn it. And this is always part of the conundrum of art. What do we do? Do we go with what we see, or do we go with theory? Personally, I think good art is a combination of the two. We need the theory to pin what we see, something to pin what we see onto. So there's always a little bit of ambiguity in this area here, but I am going to lift up my darker values somewhat, if only so that this cast shadow really stands out good and strong. So what I need to do is, if I lift one value, I need to lift all the values. So the great thing about Pastel is it doesn't obliterate or cover up what's underneath. We can just hatch over the top and gently lift the values. I can see, if I squint, the core shadow. There's just a small little section of it coming in here. So this is all getting lighter. Just keep a little hint of that core shadow there, and in turn I can then come in and lift that reflected light even more. I can see it quite strongly here. So I've picked up another pastel which is lighter in value but not as light as this. So you can see it really starting to come alive now. It's not as saturated either, it's an olive green. So middle value olive green. I can then incorporate this into my transition there from the shadow family into the light family. I can add some more intensity in the light, and I can see that it's creeping up and over because this Pears kind of got a little wonky top on it there. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that one. Let's do the same on the bottom pair. Back in for my middle green. This one does actually have a very strong shadow on the far side, so I'm going to keep that good and dark. Okay, keep that one really dark. And then it starts to creep up around here. So I'm pushing some of these areas, pushing the cast shadow, pushing the terminator shadow, but they're not creeping wildly away from where they need to be. There's quite strong reflected light on this as well. And there's an optical illusion that happens here where, because our eyes adjust to a dark part of the drawing, we automatically think this is a very, very light bit of value. But if we were to take a black and white or a grayscale photo of this, you'd see that this is nowhere near that value. It's closer to that. It's just an optical illusion. One of the most common difficulties in drawing is that aspect, where our eyes adjust to a dark area. Let's see now, there's a little bit of a bump in it there. and I'm looking at what I know. So I'm taking what I know and I'm looking at what I see and sort of putting those two things together. Just lift up that really bright green a little bit more. Now I could tint that colour a little bit. It's a slightly more, it's not quite as intense a green. It's slightly more sort of orangey, yellowy. So I could pull in a different colour at this point. I could try incorporating a little bit of a yellow ochre. Okay, just to soften that down a little bit. And this is where pastels really come into their own. It's called optical mixing, so we're adding just fragments of another colour, and little particles of it stay on the surface there and catch the light. Let's pull that shadow of the reflection, highlight, back in. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. Let's go on to the stalk now. So before I do the stalk, I might just look at the background. The stalk is darker than the background, therefore the background has to lift somewhat. I'm going to go back to one of my grey pastels. If I lift the background up a little bit, then I should be able to pull the dark stalk back in. There we go, we can just catch that there. Now the stalk has a little bit of light on. It's not white, it's sort of a grey. Not a very light grey, but a middle grey. Do I see the same on this? Just a touch of it. Okay. Now it's probably time to tackle a little bit of that really complex pattern that we have going on. So I need to, it's brown, it's quite a warm brown, but I need to follow that pattern of light as I do it. So looking at it from life, I can see it's such a warm brown. I'm going to reach for a different pastel, and I think this colour here will help me. So if I use that, and if I use a deeper umber for the shadow portions, I think between the two, that should work. I may need to lighten this slightly. Just remember, it's a delicate surface pattern, and it's very important that it doesn't start to contradict the light or take over from the rest of the pear. I also have a lighter ochre here. It's one of those things, it's such a delicate part of the process. In some ways there'd be a case for saying, well, let's just leave it out, keep our pears green, rather than trying to get that effect and destroying everything. Well, that might be as far as I take that. Now for the last stage, I wanted to start pushing these colours out a little bit more, so we're going to look at push into a little bit more colour theory. So for the shadow, I can go for a whole range of cool colours. So that's everything from blue to purple. The value is important. So if I pick out a few bluish purples, I've got a deeper one here. So in the cast shadow, where we've got cool colours, I can bring in a darker form of purple here and a lighter lilac here. And I can crisscross or juxtapose all these colours and values over each other to create a much more interesting effect. Okay, so it's really one of the things Pastel does exceptionally well. It's called optical mixing. So instead of mixing the colour literally on the page, it's mixing in the viewer's eye. And the same reckoning, we could do the same for the surface. So it's warm white, so we could use a combination of yellows, light peaches. So here I have a light orange tint. A slightly more ochre, which is a little darker. That's okay, it's still not conflicting. And the sort of striping effect can be quite dramatic in a pastel. We can bring one of the dark, cool colours into the background. What we couldn't do is bring one of the warm yellows into the background. That wouldn't work at all. I could potentially push this a little bit further still into yellows. I can also introduce that yellow into the green, because green is made of blue and yellow. I can bring some other greens into this. I just need to make sure that the values stay consistent. So dark hatching in the dark area, light hatching in the light area. So let's try something a little crazy. So I have this colour here. It's a beautiful turquoise colour, gorgeous colour. I'm thinking, how can I incorporate this in? Well, it's blue, so it could possibly pull into this shadow area. That works okay, doesn't conflict too much. I'm keeping away from the crevice or the dark accent. And another place I can pull this in is somewhere in the green, because green is it's a secondary colour, a mix of yellow and blue. In theory, I can pull this in somewhere. I don't think it's going to work in the lightest areas, because they would tend towards the warmer yellows. It'll work in the darker areas, it's going to be too light. But in the middle portion, it can work just wonderfully. So very gentle little hatching on that. And it just catches the eye, and it's a way to add a lot more drama and interest to your drawing. I could also possibly pull in a light yellow, so light in value that it needs to come up towards the highlight. So that concludes the demonstration of two pairs. Hope you have fun trying your own example, and send me your drawings and I'll give you some feedback. Thank you.